have you ever been in that position where you've had to be all in? It might be where you've gone for a walk and there's that point of no return. Have you ever had that sort of situation? I was trying to rack my brain and come up with a story of that I could share. So I said to Sarah, have we ever had that experience? And then she rattled about 6 things off that I had took her into, walks or mountains we had gone up to the point where you're halfway up and you look down and you think, we can't go back that way, because I had misread the map and gone up the wrong path, which was the side of a mountain rather than a footpath. But one that struck in my mind when Sarah was sharing, many years ago, some of you will remember American Adventure, the theme park that was over in a quarry somewhere, and there was a fairground ride or a roller coaster called the Missile, which was a tiny little roller coaster, and it sort of dragged you up, and then it let you go, and you went woo, like that, and then you did it backwards. It was only 15 seconds like that, and then you did it backwards and back up again. We had been in the queue probably half an hour, and then we got in the ride, and you sit in the ride, and then it drags you up at a sort of 45, 50-degree angle. And just at the top, I turn to Sarah and say, "Are you okay?" Her reply to me was, "Darling, it's too late for that." Or words to that effect. But that was that point of no return. It's too late. It's too late to ask that question, because what's going to happen next is you get to the top, you hear a click, and then whoosh, and you do that, and then you go back again. I've never got set on a roller coaster since for some reason. But I don't know whether you've had that experience of being all in at any point. But that's what I want us to look at today. And when we look at the story of Gideon, which is why we saw that little cartoon, I think Gideon ended up in a position where he was all in. And by that I mean it's you, God, or nothing. We're in that position, God, it's you've got to turn up, you've got to do, or there is nothing else that we can do. We find Gideon, I mean that story was quite generous to Gideon, I think, because we find Gideon at the start of the story hiding in a wine press. And we've got a couple of photos that purport to be of the sort of era. And on the left is a wine press. And you'll notice that's down in the ground. And on the right is the threshing floor. Now that needs to be up in the open, because part of threshing is the wind comes in and blows the chaff away. Gideon was threshing, he wasn't pressing the wine, he was threshing the grain in a wine press. He was hiding. There was a sense of fear. There was a sense of, I'm protecting that little thing that I've got, and I don't want to go out there. And then, as we read in, so this is just, I'm going to be jumping around Judges 6 and 7, but in Judges 6 verse 12, it says, "When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, 'The Lord is with you, mighty warrior,' to the man that's hiding in the winepress. And Gideon goes, 'What, me? Is there someone else in it?' And he has that sort of moment. But if we jump right to the end of the story, in 8:22, you'll notice there, the Israelites said to Gideon, 'Rule over us, you, your son, your grandson, because you have saved us from the hand of Midian.'" He goes from someone who's hiding away in fear to a person of such stature that the people say, "We want you to be our leader. We want you to be the one that leads us." Something happens there, doesn't it? Something happens, and that is the God factor that we need in our lives. There's a transition that happens. And I've got 3 simple things I want to bring out of this story as we look through. And the first one is that something happened because Gideon became secure in God. He became secure in the call that God had for him. He became secure in the status that God was placing him in, and he became secure in the provision that God was able to give him. There's something happened in his thinking where he became secure as a person. He moved from fear into faith. He moved from that sense of being clueless and scared into being called and equipped. But that was after he asked 3 times, "Are you sure?" He did go through that process. Say, "Are you sure, God?" As he brought an offering to the situation, and he laid the fleeces out. "God, are you sure?" And he asked those questions. But there came a point where then he was secure in that. Can we be secure in our calling, in our faith, in what God's done for us? I think we can still go to God, "Are you sure?" But we're in a different situation to Gideon. Because we have this. We have the voice of God speaking into our situations. We have the promises of God in here that are when we say, "Are you sure?" God says, "Have you read this? Have you read what I say about you? Have you read what I declare about you? This is what I'm saying to you." We don't need to lay a fleece out anymore because we have God's word. And we have Jesus to stand alongside us. We can be secure. But can I just be honest for a minute? And I'm not saying this out of pity. I don't want pity. I don't want sort of encouragement. But really just put me in context. We've all found the last 18 months tough, haven't we? It's been a tough season. I need to be honest and say there have been times at 2 a.m. I've written resignation letters in my head. Where I've just been lying there in bed, awake, and I've started to write resignation letters saying, "God, is this really what am I?" Because you start to then question. I can say, I can reassure you I've never put pen to paper, because then you wake up and you realize, no, God, you have called me. You have given me a purpose. This is what you want me to do. And doubt isn't a bad thing. But when it grips us and starts to pull us away from what God has called us to do, that's where it becomes dangerous. But we are called by God. And I can say now that with certainty, God's called me to do what I'm doing. And whilst he calls me, I will do it. And so don't worry, I haven't written a resignation letter and put pen to paper at all. But for my first point, I really want to pray a simple prayer of boldness, of faith for all of us, that we would know that calling of God, that sense of security in God, that sense of security in who we are and who God has called us to be. And so God, I just pray for each one of us that where our faith is wavering, you would just come and affirm again. Where our fingertips are becoming weak of that holding on, Lord, I pray you would just lift us again. And I pray for a real sense of faith and certainty to grow across this congregation and this church. Come, Spirit of God, and affirm us afresh that we are yours and we are in your hands, and in you all is well. Amen. So that's the first thing. So that's the first thing, which is the sense that we are secure in God. The second thing I think I see from this story is that Gideon then becomes committed to God. Once he becomes secure, once he knows, God, that's what you want me to do, he becomes committed to God. He puts his faith into the call, and he puts his faith into action. There must have been something of an affirmation. It says the Spirit of God came on Gideon, and then he puts the call out. That must be a scary point, where suddenly you go, God, I'm going to call, I'm actually going to believe what you've said, and I'm now going to call and see what happens. And there must have been quite a long moment from when he called to the people to say, come and gather, to when they started to gather. But then suddenly 32,000 come. 32,000 men come and stand around him. And he has stepped out in faith. And that must have felt good when you suddenly see that affirmation as people come. Even though they're up about, we reckon that it was about 135,000 in the Midianite army. So it's still not quite great odds, but yeah, great, we've got 32,000. And then we get these wonderful words, which is what God seems to do so often. When we start to have security in ourselves, God so often starts to strip away. When our security is based on who we are, on what we can do, God so often starts to strip away. In 7 verse 2, the Lord said to Gideon, "You have too many men for me to deliver Midianites in their hands, in order that Israel may not boast against me that her own strength has saved her. Announce now to the people, anyone who trembles with fear may turn back and leave Mount Gilead." So 22,000 men left, while 10,000 men remained. Have you ever had that experience where you're feeling that sense of confidence, but it's in yourself, and then God starts to strip things away? Because he doesn't want you to be confident in you. He wants you to be confident and secure in him. We are committed to God. We are secure in God. And not only did it go from 32,000 down to 10,000, it went from 10,000 down to 300 against 125,000. I don't know if you can get your maths around that. 32,000 is a football stadium. It's a huge crowd. 10,000 is a small football stadium. I'm trying to picture what 10,000, is Calverton about 10, 12,000? It's the population of Calverton. Then down to 300. That's a street of people who are there with you. You've gone from a large town down to a street, and that then becomes that God says that's who we're going to work through. Over this last 18 months, I've noticed, and as I've talked to other church leaders, God has been stripping our confidence away. Our confidence in ourselves. He's stripped away our security around us. This kind of healthy margin. But he hasn't stripped our confidence in him away. So where we've been confident in programs, or confident in bank balances, or confident in lovely, big, huge volunteer teams, he's stripped a lot of that away. Because he's saying, I want you to be confident in me. I want you to be secure in me. And I can tell you that is not easy. That's not an easy process to go through. And it's not just us, it is churches up and down this land. And as I've spoken to other church leaders, we don't quite know what's around the corner, but God. As we become secure in God, not secure in our programs, in our finances, and all those things. And it's at that moment we need to be all in. Because this is this point of no return, isn't it? God, it's only you now. We can't do this on ourselves. The church in the UK got quite good at putting on a show over the last few years. I'm hoping we're moving away from a show to say, God, it's got to be you. It's not our talent. We work with you. Don't get me wrong, these 300 men still had to do something. They still had a task to do, but they didn't do it in their strength. They did it in his strength and in his provision. How are you feeling in this season? Have you felt in your own personal life some of your security has gone? And I hope that security of what the world offers, we need to hang on to the security of God. Because he is the one we can be secure in, he is the one we can depend on, and we know will always provide. So we're now in this story. So Gideon has become secure in God as he's heard God's call. He's then become committed to God as he stepped out into action and started, and also he's now all in as God whittles down from 32,000 down to 300. And we're now at this third stage where they're entering the battle, and this is now at a point of God, it's nothing but you. There's nothing that I can do now. We can't win this battle unless you turn up. We can't do this unless you are there with us. And that's how I feel in terms of us as a church and churches across We can't do this, God, unless you're there. Unless you turn up, we cannot do this anymore in our own strength. We have to do it in your strength. And God then gives Gideon this battle plan. But before that, do you notice the little story in the cartoon? They were in the night shirts because God took them down at night, where God takes Gideon down to hear the dream of one of the Midianites. What that shows me is God knows you and knows what you need. Gideon was a man of uncertainty. He wanted affirmation. He had stopped asking for affirmation, but I think God knew that he still needed it. So he said, he set the situation up for Gideon to go down and to hear and to be emboldened, because that's what God knows he needed. Can I just add this in? God knows you. He knows what you need. He knows what you as an individual need, and he meets your needs, and he meets you where you're at, sometimes without us even asking. Some of us need affirmation in different ways. Some of us need, there's all sorts of, and God knows exactly who we are and meets us where we are at. But let me just finish this story off, because there's a very different battle plan as God takes them down into the Midianite army. And just picture the scene, 300 people armed with big bazookas and big cannons and armed with a trumpet, a water jug, and a flaming torch. That's what they went down into the battle with, those three things. Now, this is a plan A, God. This is you or nothing. Well, maybe we can kind of, play a little bit of jazz, and maybe that will really unsettle them. There's not a lot you can do with a trumpet, a water jug, and a torch in terms of a battle. And think of it from a worldly point of view. What actually they did was they blew a trumpet to say, hey, we're over here, yoo-hoo, Midianites, we're over here. And just to really show you where we are, we're going to light ourselves up with a torch. We're over here, 300 of us. That's not a great battle plan, is it? Stealth, sneaking in quietly no, we're over here, yoo-hoo. That was the plan. But actually what happened as they blew the trumpets, as they shouted, as they smashed the jars, and can you imagine that noise of 300 jars echoing around? As the lights suddenly started to flare, because of the nervousness or the anxiety that was already in the Midianites, it caused panic. And God knew the right thing to do. It was a very unusual battle plan, but this is where we have to trust God and say, God, we don't know the way forward, but you do. You know the best thing to do. Let us trust you as we take step by step forward and we follow you. What in human terms looks absolutely stupid, often in God's terms is exactly the right thing to do. And we're not armed with a trumpet and a torch, but we're armed with God's word. We have the truth of God that we can take into situations and declare over circumstances and situations. We have his Spirit in us, this light that will radiate to all those around us. We need to smash a few jars that maybe is hiding that. Sarah's talking about the unblocking. We've had pictures in the past of people hiding under umbrellas. There's some things we need to smash. And that might be fears, that might be anxieties, that might be a busyness, as Martin was talking about. We can sometimes become so busy that we miss God. There's also sometimes dust can settle on us through disappointment and unforgiveness, and we need to get rid of that to allow the goodness and the beauty of God to shine out from us. So there may be something God is challenging you that needs smashing to allow him to radiate out. But it just feels like we're in a moment where we've got to say, God, it's you or nothing now. We're going to follow you. We're going to serve you. Don't always understand what it is you're doing, but we trust you. We look to you, and we know you are the God who will provide, and you are the God who will lead us forward. And so, I don't want to do a big, heavy emotional, come on. It's really just a question, are we all in? And effectively, what this last 18 months has weeded out those that were a little bit not quite sure, but kind of half in, half out. This is about being all in for Jesus, about being there for him and seeing his kingdom advance, being willing to serve him, not out of a duty, not out of obligation or me twisting your arm, but because God has placed something in you that you need to go and do. These men just followed Gideon. They did what he said, and they saw the victory. I think we're in a situation where it's just, are we all in? Are we willing to trust Jesus, whatever? Are we willing to look to him and say, God, this is your church. You need to provide for us. As things are just broken and stripped away, as the rubbish that got in the way is now gone. Let's just fall more in love with Jesus. Let's follow him step by step. It kind of feels too simplistic, because it is. Following Jesus is just about following Jesus. It's about loving him and trusting him and day by day stepping forward with him. We try to turn it into programs and teaching, and it's just love Jesus. And as you love Jesus, you'll love people around you. And as you love people around you, they'll start to love Jesus. It is quite simple as we follow him and we allow him to be who he is through us. So that's what I've picked up from this story of Gideon, and what I want us to as we head forward. I don't want a big rally call to the army in the sense of that sense. It's just, are we all in? Are we willing to trust him and follow him? Let me pray. Jesus, as we've looked at the cross, that's a point where you were all in, where you said there's no turning back. And we want to be people who follow you and who are all in, who say, but you, there is nothing. And I pray as a church, as we look forward, as we move forward, that you would give us the things that we need to do, but help us to keep it simple and about you. Help us to keep it simple and just trusting you and seeing you do amazing things. I pray right now that, Lord, that you would start to work in individuals' hearts where there's doubt. I pray you will start to bring certainty. Where there's an anxiety, I pray you'll start to bring a hope and a purpose. Where there's tiredness, I pray, Lord, fresh energy. And where we need to rest, Lord, I pray you would give us rest too. Help us to get that balance right. But help us to be a people who trust you, who look to you and follow you, Jesus. Amen.